right, guys, welcome. We are starting our coronavirus quarantine reviews. Oh, I had a video. Dang it, I just remembered. We had a special video made, and I forgot to play it. Maybe I'll play it tomorrow. It's no big deal. But I did want to thank some of you guys. After yesterday's podcast, a lot of you had some positive comments to throw out there, and I appreciated that. A lot of you had some stories to show out there that, a lot of you are not so much worried about the virus per se. You're just, like the same way I am. You're just kind of worried about the rest of the stuff that goes on around it. The news today, of course, the big news is that Simon Properties, they're shutting down all of their malls and their plazas and their shopping centers. I think 10 days, they said they're going to be closed for 10 days, which is going to be kind of a big deal. The biggest thing that's going to hurt is the outlier restaurants, because a lot of those were going to remain open with the drive-through and the curbside, and if those have to shut down completely, that's going to be a problem. Not only for the people working there, you assume that, obviously that's going to be a problem for them, but that's going to be a problem for people who were hoping that they had a supply of food coming through places like that. So that's going to be something to watch out for, to see exactly how that plays out. Now, Simon just made the announcement a couple hours ago, so we're still waiting to see how everything filters out. They said they're closing in about 2 hours from when I'm recording this, and then they'll be open again in 10 days. So we're still waiting to get a lot of those fine details. Oh, which reminds me, I know someone who's an assistant manager at a store that is in a Simon strip mall. So I should send them a message and see what's up. But while I'm doing that, we did get a couple scary stories, comments from some of you guys, and it seems like more of the bigger, denser population areas with older citizens. I'm trying to think of nice ways to say it, but basically nursing homes, a lot of old people in the hospital dying, and that's exactly what we thought. And some of you have seen that firsthand. Some of you outside of the United States that are in areas that have kind of these large population centers. There's a large population density, and you're seeing that. But for most everybody else, everything seems to be, okay for the most part. Here, again, we now have a couple cases. They've said you're going to see this boom of new cases of people who are going to be testing positive for the coronavirus over the next few days. But that's just because there's a backlog of tests that are now going to be finishing up, coming through the system. Some of them are getting, accelerated, pushed through. They've been able to, ramp up, so they have more tests. They're able to process more tests. The tests are finally coming through. Some of the first tests that have been in are, coming out. And so you're going to see, bam, a whole bunch more people infected. So it's not so much that it's getting worse. It's that we're getting a fuller picture of what's going on. So don't freak out in the next couple days about all of that stuff happening. Simon Properties. I'm hoping I can get a reply before I'm done recording. But today we are going to talk about comic books. And this is kind of an odd week for me, especially with comic books, because there are a lot of weeks that I just don't buy a lot of comics. And this week I had a pretty good stack. Now, to be fair, a large chunk of that is reprint material. I have been buying a lot of reprint material over the last few weeks, and this week is no exception to that. But most of the comics I bought, I really liked. Anywhere from the 80 to 90 range of where I would grade them. Even if you say 70, those are something that's in like the 70, 75, I'm kind of disappointed in, but still overall I like it, even though it's starting to dip lower. I kind of grade things like the way you would grade them in school. Once you get, 60 is when it's starting to get like, why are you even doing this? And 50 and below, it's like, you failed one way or another. Below that, it's how bad did you fail? So I'm wondering. Some of you made comments when I was talking about comics and comic stores getting shut down and stuff, and you were like, "Oh no, I won't be able to buy any comics," because there's no good comics out there. But there are some good comics out there, or at least some decent, or some halfway decent, or some mildly fun, or whatever comics out there. So, I'm curious. Did you pick anything up this week? Was there anything in particular that you read that you enjoyed more than something else? But then also with these shutdowns, with the mall shutdowns happening, now with Simon Properties shutting stuff down, and mall closures and things like that. Has your local store been affected at all? Because first they rolled back the hours. They were telling everybody you got to trim your hours at the malls and whatever, and so everybody was kind of trimming hours, except for one store. We have one guy in town; he just doesn't care. he's the same hours, same days. He just doesn't care. So he's open whenever. But everyone else had to kind of adjust their hours and whatever. Well, now that they're saying they're going to shut down, that's one Wednesday at least that they're going to be shut down. That you won't be able to go in and buy new comics like at all during that time. So the question is, what do you do? Now here in this town, it's you've got 3 comic book stores. So how loyal is someone going to be to their local comic shop if they go to the shop that shuts down? So that's something you gotta kind of wonder about and worry about. But then on the other hand, there's going to be issues where, what if this continues? What if they shut everything down for 10 days, but then after 10 days, they're like, okay, this isn't cutting it, or maybe things do get worse, or, maybe the Federation of UPS and FedEx delivery drivers decide that they're not going to go out into this mess anymore, and they decide they're going to stop doing deliveries, and so the books all come to a standstill. Then what? Then what do you do? Comics are just not going to be delivered. What does that do to your local stores and stuff like that? So there are some issues we got to worry about. What does this do to your store? All right. So we'll see if we can get a reply back on that. All right. So comics, let's see. I've got them on the desk behind me here. So Plunge is the first one we've got there. And Plunge is part of the Joe Hill Hill House imprint, the new horror line from DC. Honestly, this could easily be Vertigo, except that Vertigo has gone in the toilet over the last few years, and nobody really cares about a lot of the Vertigo books anymore. They even tried bringing back the Sandman stuff, and nobody really even cares about a lot of that stuff. So they did their own. I think it's even Black Label now. They put Black Label on it because that's their adult line. But Hill House imprint, everything like this. So it's a double imprint. I guess they might as well throw Vertigo on there as long as they're doing everything else. But I like Plunge a lot. I really enjoy this story. So basically, distress calls and people who should be dead but they're not quite dead, and people who should be alive are dead, and this crew goes in to figure out what's going on and whatever. Anyway, this book not only does it do a really good job of well, first of all, the artwork is fantastic. It's Stuart Immonen, who I think, if anybody knows their comic book artwork, Stuart Immonen is great. And he's a comic book artist of great renown for many years. I really like a lot of his artwork. But the other thing that this book does that I think is key, and what makes it work, and what makes horror so difficult to do in comics, and why it works in this book, is that one, you have to make the characters, you have to make them likable. You have to make them, I'm going to say appealable, but appealable is not really the right term. Relatable is good. Relatable is a good way to do it. You have to make these people that not necessarily that you care about, but you do like them. You have an affinity for them, so that when the distressful things start happening, you're like, oh no, I don't want them to die, right? And that's how horror comics really work. I mean, the Walking Dead, as much as it was about zombies, it really was about Rick Grimes and everybody else. And as long as Rick and Carl were okay, then the comic was fine. And that was part of the problem, part of the problem with the show as well. You have to have the characters that people care about and like, and then once you have characters that people like and they care about, then once you put them in these situations where maybe they survive, maybe they won't, that's when you get the tension, the horror. That's when you really start to worry about what's going to happen, and you get drawn into the story. I mean, that's what Plunge does so well. We're living the Purge. Sorry about that. A little slip of the tongue there, but that's what Plunge does so well. Great characters. It's a fun story. Fantastic artwork. I bought this book. It was one of those things where it was a number one, and so I thought, what the heck, I'll grab a number one. Really liked it. Grab number two. Really liked it. This is a good series. I like it a lot. All right, next up, Aquaman. Now, Aquaman... Oh, actually, this is the wrong Aquaman. Okay, wait, hold on. This is the old issue of Aquaman. Here's the new issue of Aquaman. Because I hadn't read the old issue of Aquaman. So I had to catch up in order to read the new issue of Aquaman. So I'm going to take the old one here and set it aside real quick. You saw nothing. All right, there's the new issue of Aquaman. And, of course, my lights are causing some havoc on there with reflections and whatnot. But, yeah, Aquaman 58. So... Kelly Sue DeConnick took over the series a while ago, and I was, whatever, kind of passed on it. A couple months ago, I decided to pick one up. There was a guest writer came in, filled in an issue, and I read it, and it was good. I enjoyed it. But then it was just for one issue. She came back right after that, and I was like, I don't know, whatever. But I went ahead and continued reading it, and I do enjoy it, but this is one of those where I enjoy it, but it has some issues. One of the big issues with a book like this is that while I enjoy the comic, because what it does is it focuses on characters. There's a lot more with dealing with who the people are, what's going on, especially Aquaman. He's the leader of an undersea kingdom. He's royalty, whatever, all of that kind of stuff going on. There's some of that political intrigue and all of that stuff that happens. At the same time, the book kind of turns into like a daytime soap opera, which is not my favorite thing in the world. So I enjoy the book overall, but there are times when you're reading it and you're just kind of like, okay, we're going to deal with some of this stuff. We're going to deal with the people, here come the trio of old harpies who are going to be freaking out because of this wedding thing and whatever. And again, it's kingdoms and it's kings and queens, and there's a lot of who succeeds on the throne, and people are married and divorced, and who gets to control the kingdom and whatever. And a lot of that stuff I don't really care about as much. So there are times it's better than others. But again, I like it more than I dislike it. So it's still good, but not great. And that's, it's okay. Batman 91. This is continuing the story of the designer. And I do pick up the variant on this one. Always have picked up the variant on Batman. Batman, Superman, Detective Action, all those. Well, not Detective anymore. I quit Detective for a while. Anyway, doesn't matter. Okay, as you all know, I was not a big fan of Tom King and his run, bringing in Catwoman and all that stuff. Again, going back to the daytime soap opera stuff. Not a huge fan with all of that. So getting back to a real sort of Batman book has been fun. It's been good. But the problem is this character, the designer, first of all, we still have no real information on who this guy is. We really don't have any information on why he's supposed to be so great. I mean, again, does he have a meta gene ability to design better traps for trapping superheroes? Is that what this is supposed to be? Why is he dressed like a 70s pimp? Like, I don't understand. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Why does he have a big Dr. Dre D on his face mask as his design? It just, there's, for a guy named the designer, he really should have found one to make him a better costume. Anyway, regardless, I still, obviously I like it better than a lot of the Tom King stuff. I like it. You still get a decent amount of story in the issue. You're not getting 23 pages of bad poetry and shots of just Batman climbing the outsides of buildings and kicking someone in the face and climbing a building and swinging and kicking someone in the face, and that's it. For an entire book, so that's fine. So I do like it more, but it's just I want some real information on this guy, because it's been several issues now and I still feel like we're just kind of treading a lot of water. We got some insights last time, which was cool, but I want some more, because we're just like, okay, like we get it, like we I feel like we've kind of done this act already, and it's just kind of padding itself out over and over again. All right, He-Man and the Masters of the Multiverse. This book, this is one of those books where it's fun, but it's also kind of annoying in all the different things that they try to do. They're trying to take every little piece of He-Man lore and every different iteration of the character and find a way to work the story together. My biggest problem with this particular issue, though, is the artwork. The artwork feels very rushed in this one. Tom Derenick, who I believe has been doing the entire series, it feels like there's a lot of scribbling going on in this one. It just feels like a lot of the detail isn't there that has been in some of the other issues. So this one feels a little lighter. I liked that they brought in the like mini comic, like Savage version of He-Man. It's a version that doesn't use the power sword as much, uses the shield and the battle axe version of He-Man, who's a lot darker. That's cool. That's fun. I like that. But with as much as they're slamming all these characters together and doing all these things to figure out a way to make all these things, mesh, it's a lot of this stuff just gets like kind of skipped over. It just goes by really quick because they gotta get to the next thing that they want to push in there. And I almost wish, as much as it's neat to see all these different things, come together and get pushed in there, I almost wish they had held back some of it and explored some of these different worlds and some of these different characters a little bit more before just moving on. Instead of having a different one every issue, allow it to explore some of these things a little bit more. I think that would have made it a little more interesting than the way they're doing it now, which is just kind of like a, all over the place to get to the next issue. So again, in general, I enjoy it, but I enjoy it more than I don't enjoy it. But it's just kind of one of those things that it's a junk food comic series. It's not one of these things you're going to remember in 10 years as like, man, that was the greatest thing I've ever read. It's just kind of one of those things where it's like, you read it and you're like, cool, and then you put it in your box and then you forget all about it until the next issue comes out. And then once the series is done, maybe there's going to be some time where a couple toys are sitting on your shelf or something and you're like, oh yeah, that's right, like in the comic when those two characters, but then otherwise it'll be gone. So anyway, it's fine, but whatever. Justice League with the Eradicator 43. So Snyder being gone, doing the heavy metal thing that I don't care about at all, is fine, or dark metal or whatever, I forget what it's being called. I don't care about any of that stuff, so I'm glad that Justice League went back to, normal, real stories. The problem I have, though, with this particular one is that they did stuff with, like, the Flash getting weak and forgetting or losing his ability to to stay super fast, and then they don't do anything to explain why or how he gets over it. It's just kind of like it's there and then it's gone. And then the Wonder Woman, she gets attacked, but then suddenly she's fine. You have these things where it's like there's something there and it's kind of cool, but then it's just kind of forgotten about, and then they move on. This wraps up this story of the Eradicator, so they can move on to whatever the next thing's going to be. It's fine overall as a story, but I just feel like there are these big plot holes in the middle of this, where it's like, okay, well, you didn't really explain what happened there. You didn't really explain how this works. You didn't, all right. And that was just kind of that. So, whatever. Justice League. Okay, so now we're getting into the reprints. So those were my new books from DC. This is DC. I haven't broken down by category. So now DC reprints. This is the Brave and the Bold 28. This is the facsimile copy. Okay, and some people have asked. So this week we got reprints. We've got this facsimile of, this is the first appearance of the Justice League. So this is the first time Justice League ever came together as a team. And then we've got this Justice League, the Giffen era, the Wahaha era, where we got Justice League and Justice League Europe, Justice League International, Justice League America, and then the Grant Morrison run we got of JLA. Now you can see this Dollar Comics. This one is Dollar Comics. This one is facsimile. And a couple people have asked several times, what, like, explain the difference. They weren't quite getting it. So people understand these reprints, the dollars. These are like the Marvel True Believers. These are the books of the stories, the pages of the story with ad for trade paperbacks, right? So these are, if it was 28 pages of story, then these are 32 pages altogether, because there's a couple pages of some ads, and you've got your story pages, and that's all that's going to be in these books. And for $1, like, even if you read these when these came out, and even if maybe you have them hidden in a box somewhere, but for $1, it's like I usually pick them up anyway, just to read them one more time, just to or to have a newer copy or whatever. And especially if it's one like this particular run, I love this particular run. Don't necessarily love, but this is the long hair Superman era, and I haven't read a bunch of stuff from that era in a long time, so I figured I'd read it just to kind of remind myself what it was like back then. This era I loved. Absolutely loved this era of comics, so grab those to throw into the collection. But getting to this facsimile edition, these facsimile books, what they are basically reprinting the entire books, front to back, every ad, every story page, everything you'd want in there. So, for instance, there's an ad for Mickey Mantle's Champions workout program from the National Sports Council for 10 cents. That's the ad that was on the inside of this copy of Brave and the Bold. You've got your story pages that you had just like in the original comic. High-powered binoculars and 150 Civil War soldiers. So these are designed to look just like those books. And the pages are even... It's not quite the old newsprint, slick newsprint style with the ink that would rub off in your hands. It's at least a little bit nicer than that. It's more of a archival quality of a rough paper, but it's still kind of that older style. It has a little bit of that smell from the ink, but not quite the same as like something from Alterna or one of those or those old books. You've got the text pages of stuff. So essentially, you are picking up a complete reprint of the book as it was if you had picked it up off the shelf back in those days. So that's why I love these books. Now the real difference is, one, the size is a little different. These books would have been just a little bit bigger. So sometimes you will see that there's a little bit extra border on the pages because they have to kind of shrink it in order to make it fit in the width, which adds some extra white at the top and bottom. They do change the fine print at the bottom because they have to nowadays, and of course they put the barcode and they change the price on the front to match today's market. But otherwise, you're getting a complete reprint of the book as it was on the shelves, and I love that. I love looking through this stuff. Part of that, I guess, is the history buff that's within me, and part of that's just because of I like comics, and I like seeing what it was like. I like seeing that whole package, not just the story, but that experience of what it was for those comics. So those are cool. I like those a lot. All right, Spider-Woman. This is the one new Marvel book this week. Quick note. I did not buy the Robin 80th anniversary because my particular copy did not come in. I liked the Stephanie Brown version. I liked the artwork on it. I liked that particular cover, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to buy that cover. I liked that particular cover. I ordered that cover. It did not come in. So I thought, well, I could buy one of the just regular, it's red, whatever, but I don't need an extra copy of this thick $9.99 special. I know it's going to come in. Eventually, it's just like delayed a week or, whatever. So I will have one come in. It just didn't arrive with everything else, and I'm loyal to the store where I ordered it from. So even though there's extra shops here in town, and I could have picked it up at one of the other two that got it in, I said no. I specifically asked for it from this store, so that's where I'm going to get it from. So that's otherwise I would have picked up Robin. All right, Spider-Woman. So this particular book, I enjoyed it. I did. Again, it's a #1. I bought it just because it's a #1. I didn't have any other new Marvel books that came out this week that I cared about, so I figured, what the heck, I'd give it a shot. And I enjoyed it. I didn't expect to. Well, it's not, I don't know. I wouldn't say I didn't expect to, but I wasn't excited for it. I didn't really, the weeks leading up to this, I wasn't hyped for it or anything, but when I read it, I enjoyed it, except for there's a couple moments in here. They have to do this thing because she's a female superhero, so there are these teenage kids, and there's this one kid, and he's like, well, you're a girl. Can you even do anything to stop the bad guys? And it's like, come on. Do we have to do this? Like, this is, people want to complain about sexism, and then do it. and then write it, then they're going to put it in there. So it's like, whatever. So it's like, my overall score, it's like I'm going to deduct some points from it, but it's not going to make it go from a pass to a fail. I enjoyed it overall. I did like it. I would even recommend it, even though it has this dumb little part in there where you're just like, oh, shut up. Come on now. Let's move on. The artwork is great. You actually get two little stories in here. You get the main story of her trying to protect this girl from being kidnapped. And then there's also the story of her switching up her costume and, trying to figure out how she's going to make money as a mom and, whatever. And the two do go together because the second story is actually a flashback before the first story to just kind of explain why some of the things are different. I'm not sure why. I guess it's not as exciting, so they didn't want to open with it, but they threw it in there so there'd be something to explain it. It's kind of one of those things that you'd expect to see in like a Marvel Age or Marvel Premiere, or, something like that. Marvel Comics Presents, but they're not really doing that kind of stuff anymore. So it gets added as a backup feature. And one of the things is, I have no idea if this is a variant or whatever. I got so confused looking at all the different covers and there's one where it's this exact same pose but in the new costume, and then there's one where it looks like the animated the cartoon series from like the 60s and whatever, and there were like 11 or 12 covers, and I was looking at them, and whatever. Like, I just grabbed one. I was like, this looks cool. I'll just buy this one. Because it was also a book that nobody signed up for. It was a book that, we decided to cross-file. There's a couple people that anything that Spider-Man they will get. So we cross-filed it with those people. But no one specifically asked for the book, so I thought I'd get it. Okay, so apparently the strip mall that used to be owned by Simon actually sold to a different property manager a couple years ago. So Simon divested from some of these properties. So the mall that I had a friend who worked at, I thought they apparently, Simon doesn't own that anymore. Okay, well. I did talk to Killen because his store is inside a Simon Mall, and he's just like, yeah, we're going to be closed. Everybody's going to have time off. That sucks. What are you going to do? He's trying to tell people, come in and get your comics. You better get them now, because if you don't pick them up now, you're not getting them tomorrow. All right, back to the True Believers. All right, this is appearance of the Swordsman. The Swordsman... great character. Apparently he's going to have some sort of role in Empire. I don't know what it is, but reprinting. This is a True Believers. This is a $1, so you're getting the original story. This is one of those, it's fun to look back at these because you look at Captain America, you're like, yep, Captain America, cool. You look at Hawkeye, you're like, oh, I remember Hawkeye. Yeah. Swordsman looking like that. What is up with Scarlet Witch? You look at that and you're like, what? Like, what? And then you're looking at Quicksilver down there, and it looks like he got like mixed with Owlman or something with that hairdo. Like, I don't know what the deal. I understand, yeah, that is how he used to look, but that is just so. You forget sometimes how these characters used to be portrayed back in the day. Everyone else, you're like, that looks like the standard stuff, and then it's like, what? But anyway, fun, love those. We got another True Believers here. Galactus, of course, part of Empire as well. We got John Byrne artwork. I love John Byrne. Love his stuff. His stuff on Fantastic Four. Man, I'm almost willing to break down and start buying some omnibuses or visionaries or whatever they are that collect his Fantastic Four stuff. Love that stuff. Read a lot of that stuff as a kid growing up. All right, that's going to do it from Marvel. Next, we have Over the Ropes number 4. This is from Mad Cave Studios. For anyone who's a fan of professional wrestling, and you wonder sometimes, like, how much of it is real, how much of it is scripted, how much of it, do you come up with on the fly, how much of it do people know before and after and whatever. This book is legit. Of course, in companies like WWE today, multinational, billion-dollar global entities, you're not going to have stuff like happened before. But, I mean, you start talking about the Montreal screw job, you start talking about some of that stuff, yeah, things would happen on the fly. People would get screwed over in the ring. There were times, All Japan, it would happen quite a bit, where some guy would go in the ring and he thought he was a big tough dude, and someone would just beat the crap out of him legit in the middle of the wrestling ring and pin him, and that would be it. This book takes a lot of that stuff from the smaller territories and stuff that's in the past. I mean, nowadays you do that and you're probably going to get sued. It's a different era than it was back then, but it takes some of that same stuff, and it's narrating a story about a guy named Phoenix who's a up-and-coming younger wrestler. He's trying to get over into this smaller regional promotion, and he's having a tough time because the owner's son wants to be the head guy, but the fans don't really like that guy. They like Phoenix, but Phoenix can't get his big break, and so he engineers an opportunity for himself. But it seems to be one of these things where he's having a hard time figuring out who he can actually trust. And there are some swerves, and there are some backstabs that turn out to not be backstabs, but they still kind of could be. You're not 100% sure. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. It's a neat story. It's really entertaining. If you're a fan of professional wrestling, I would definitely recommend picking it up, especially if you've ever watched the independent scene, if you've ever followed ROH or TNA or the NWA, or if you've ever been a fan of historical stuff, if you've ever, read some of the old books like Wrestling at the Chase or any of that kind of stuff. You know about the territories and the old promotions, the WCCW and all that kind of stuff. Then yeah, it's a fun book, even though it's set in modern times where it wouldn't quite work the same. I think it works pretty well, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it quite a bit. And who's the writer on this? Like I said, it's from Mad Cave Studios. This is issue 4. Sandlin. I'm not sure. Sandlin. Anyway, it's a good book. Definitely recommend it if you're a fan of wrestling. And as someone I worked as a manager. I've been in a couple matches, not a whole lot. I didn't really work as a wrestler. I was a manager, worked outside the ring. I worked as a booker. I worked in Gorilla. I used to put together entrance videos. I used to build the entryway. I used to master the DVDs. I used to, sometimes I ran music. We had a projector to do entrance videos on and that kind of stuff. I've had my hands in all different parts of the stuff going on. I've had stables. I've had I've done stuff where I used to have long hair, and I've done matches where I lost my ponytail in the match and had it cut off in the match. That was fun. I've had matches where I had garbage can put over my head and hit with a steel chair. That was fun. I've done a lot of stuff in wrestling, and I've been a fan, and I've been behind the scenes, and I've seen stuff go down, and I've seen stuff go bad, and I've seen stuff that was phenomenal, that turned out great. I've seen inspirational stuff that have happened, and so I can tell you, I really like Over the Ropes. So anybody who's a fan of professional wrestling, definitely you should be checking that out. And finally, Legends of Log. It's hard to know what to say about this book. This is a book that defies a lot of explanation. This is a $1 one-shot. This is from Alterna Comics. This is on newsprint. This is black and white, actually, on the inside. So newsprint, black and white, that's not something you find a lot nowadays. And it's basically a bunch of short stories that have been collected about a character named Log, who apparently is part tree, part swamp thing, part Groot. He protects the forest. He's got an axe. Most of the stories are 2 to 4 pages long. Occasionally you'll have another character shows up who feels like an analog to something else. So you have like a Red Sonja, female Conan character, appears in one. There's one where you have like a giant snake. This Log has a friend named Bird, who's a bird, and in some places Bird just kind of like cheeps, and in some stories Bird actually talks. Some stories seem to be set in Middle Ages, where there's an ape warlock. Some seem to be set in like modern times. Some seem to be set in times unknown. It's weird. Each of these stories, the art also kind of shifts. Like, it looks like some of these stories were done over several different years, but they've all been collected and assembled here. Apparently the character made its first appearance in It Came on a Wednesday, which is Alterna's anthology series. And then they decided to collect the short stories that also this writer-artist has done in order to make this book. Again, it's only $1, so it's your expectations are going to be a little bit different than some of the other stuff that you're going to find on the market. But I enjoyed it, but it was a completely different experience from anything else that you're finding on the stands, because the character is different. It is weird. It is black and white. It's on newsprint. The stories make sense, but they don't always make sense together. So it's different. It's interesting, but it's fun. So Legends of Log, not the type of thing you see every day, but still some good stuff. So anyway, all right, guys, that's going to do it. I want to thank you guys for watching. Again, if there was anything in particular that you got this week that you wanted to talk about, feel free to leave the comments down below. Again, anything going on in the world around you that you want to shout out, anything good, fantastic that's happening, anything in particular you're worried about, you can feel free to share that if you need to get that off of your chest. But starting tomorrow, we're going to do some reviews with stuff. We've got some movies we're going to talk about starting tomorrow, and then I think on Friday we're going to talk some TV shows that you can check out. You're going to have some time to kill, some stuff to do, so we're going to have some recommendations of things that worth your time, and stuff that hopefully you will find entertaining. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.